If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know one of my favourite things to do in video games is go searching for Easter eggs and clues. And Stray definitely didn't disappoint on that front. The developers have put lots of Easter eggs and things in this game for people to find, and in today's video I'm going to bring you a list of them. Since cats apparently have 9 lives, let's make it 9 things. So here are 9 things you might have missed in Stray. Coming in at number 1 we have Skyrim references. Skyrim is one of the most memed, most referenced, and most Easter egged video games of all time. I still remember when Skyrim was new and everyone was making jokes about this game for years. There have been absolutely loads of developers that have put Skyrim references in their game, and Stray is one of them. In Midtown we can find this robot. He talks about taking a screwdriver to the knee, which is a very obvious tongue-in-cheek reference to taking an arrow in the knee, which was one of the most memed NPC lines I've ever seen. But I also found another one. In the ant village, if you go down to this area, you can find these 2 robots digging through the rubbish. One of them basically quotes an NPC from Skyrim, saying, "Some people think this is junk, but I call them treasures." This is a reference to one of the Skyrim shopkeepers who would very often say this line. So often so that it itself became a meme, and anyone who's played Skyrim for any amount of time will probably remember this line. I guess that makes us the Dover Kitten. At number 2 we have Back to the Future references. Now there are 2 characters in the game that you might find familiar. At one part of the game we have to rescue Doc. He's an eccentric character who likes to create things, but he also has a habit of getting himself into trouble. But taking a closer look at his appearance, he actually reminds me of another character named Doc. If you compare him to Doc from Back to the Future, they look very similar. In the game, Doc's hair is shaped very similarly to Doc's hair in Back to the Future, except his is made out of wires and not actually hair. But just in case you thought this was a massive coincidence, the person who asks us to find Doc, Seamus, actually is modelled after Marty McFly from the same movie. You can see he's wearing a body warmer which is very similar to Marty McFly's iconic body warmer from the first movie. And in fact, even the puzzle that we find in Seamus's flat is probably a reference to Back to the Future, the clue being related to time. The fact that Back to the Future is referenced in this game just makes me want to go back and watch it, as it's been a long time since I've watched the movies myself. But it also makes me wonder if there are any more Back to the Future references that I might have missed since it's been so long. Let me know down in the comments below if you saw any more. But talking about time leads us quite nicely onto number 3. Number 3, the clocks are wrong. So throughout this city we can find a number of clocks. All of them say different times, but something very interesting about them is that they actually have 16 hours rather than 12. The 12-hour clock that we use signifies half of a day. So the idea that in this city the clocks have 16 hours, we can assume means that the half days in this city are actually longer. So why is this interesting? Well, there's a bunch of different theories about what this can mean, and while the game never actually explains it, there are a couple of different things we could go with. In Kibble's video, he talks about the idea that it could be so far in the future that the Earth's axis has slowed down, leading to longer days. But in my opinion, I think it's far more likely to be that in this city there is no day-night cycle. One whole day is 24 hours, but if you're in an underground city with no day-night cycle, there is nothing to say that you actually have to stick to this rule. And in fact, knowing that there were large greedy corporations in this city leads me to believe that somebody decided to make the working days longer. 32-hour days means more time for working. While we don't have a concrete answer, just knowing that at some point in this city they switched to 16-hour clocks rather than 12 is very interesting. And we also can find the occasional 12-hour clock in the city as well, meaning that when the city was originally created, it wasn't on this 16-hour system. But we can also assume that the 16-hour system was implemented when some humans were alive, because we do find these 16-hour clocks in B12's room, meaning the scientist that used to live there was already on the 16-hour time schedule. I'm probably going to cover this at depth in another video, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that one. Number 4, BILZER is sus. So at one point throughout the game we end up working with this character called BILZER. In the end he betrays us, which shouldn't be that much of a surprise with a person called BILZER, but there we go. But right from the beginning, even before we meet him, there was one clue that means we should have been suspicious of him. When we first meet him, he's loitering outside the Nico factory, and we know he's keeping an eye on the entrance. But one thing I didn't notice until my second playthrough is that the newspaper he's reading is actually upside down. Now it's entirely possible that he's just pretending to read it to blend in with his environment, and he just doesn't realise that it's upside down, or he's too stupid to figure it out. But it also could be a hint that a lot of these robots don't actually know what they're doing half the time. They're just copying behaviors that they learned from humans, or they learned from books and other things that we left behind. So while he's pretending to read this, he doesn't really know how. Either that, or he was just very suspicious from the start. Number 5. Robot food. So speaking of robots mimicking humans, these robots don't need to eat, but they pretend that they do. Throughout the game we can find a number of different robot foods, including this one, which is ramen, or ramen. And then later on we have another robot talking about opening a GP Udon store. Obviously this is a joke from the developers. Ramen, it's a very clever joke. But it's also very interesting that these robots really are trying to recreate human food. But for what purpose? They don't need the food, so then why would they pretend to do this? My guess is this is the robot's way of feeling alive. They are copying the human behavior because humans were one thing that they will never be: organic. The more behaviors they copy of us, the more human it makes them feel, and the more human they feel, the more alive they feel. That's just my theory, but I really enjoyed these robot food puns. Now excuse me, I'm off to eat a bowl of HDM ice cream. Number 6. Final Fantasy VII references. So Walled City 99 is a very interesting place, but it actually has a number of different references and inspirational material. The developers have stated that Walled City 99 is based loosely on the real-life Walled City, Kowloon. This city was notorious for being the most densely packed city on the planet. And honestly, it wasn't a great place to live. It was more like something out of a horror game. In fact, there was a horror game based on this city called Paranormal HK, which was a very interesting game to play through. But there are also some other inspirations for Walled City 99, and one of those is one of my favourite games of all time, Final Fantasy VII. I firmly believe that Walled City 99 is based, at least aesthetically, on parts of Midgar. Midgar was set up very similarly to Walled City 99. In Midgar there were the plates, and below those the slums. People in the slums were much poorer, and they lived in constant danger of the people above. Very similarly in the game, the people in the slums live in danger of the people above, or more accurately, live in danger of their rubbish. In both cities there is this theme that the people who live above throw what they don't need anymore down below, and the people down below in the slums make use of those items the best that they can. There is also this very clear parallel between a city in eternal darkness backlit with neon light, something that both cities feature quite heavily. Perhaps this is even why Midtown is named Midtown. Perhaps that is a direct reference to Midgar. It could just be a coincidence, but honestly even the music sometimes does remind me of the soundtrack from the original Final Fantasy VII. Either way, even if it wasn't intentional, the parallel is definitely there. That game also featured a very intelligent cat. I could go on, but I think you get the point by now. Number 7. Cats are dicks. So since this is a game all about playing a cat, the developers have put a lot of time and effort into making you feel like you actually are playing a feline character. And one of the things they did to achieve this is make your cat an absolute. Cats being mean are very popular videos online, and this translates through to the game mechanics. For example, we see this cat scratch up pretty much any furniture and get its paws on, and we also see it knocking off these paint cans for pretty much no reason. Something that most cat owners will tell you is very accurate. But did you know you can take this even further? In this room in the slums, these robots will regularly take cat naps. If you go inside the room and meow, you'll wake all of them up, prompting different reactions from all of them. But if you want to be even more mean, in Midtown there are a number of NPCs that you can trip up. Keep doing this and eventually you will make them fully faceplant. I don't know why this is so satisfying to do, but I kind of understand cats just a little bit better now. But if you want to make this even more interesting, the entire theme of this game is something that cat owners will be very familiar with, especially cat owners of outdoor cats. Think about what the objective of this cat is. It wants to be let outside. Anyone who owns an outdoor cat will tell you that cats can never make their mind up whether they want to be in or out. I guarantee you 5 minutes after the ending of this game, this cat's going to be scratching to be let back in. Number 8. Half-Life references. So the main antagonists of this game, the Zurks, have a very clear design philosophy. The entire time I played through this game, I couldn't help but look at them and think headcrab. Headcrabs were one of the enemies from the Half-Life series, and honestly, they were pure nightmare fuel. If you never played Half-Life, headcrabs attach to people's heads and, well, turn them into basically zombies. It was a very creepy thing and I enjoyed them greatly. And it's also entirely possible that developers were aware of this similarity, considering we can find a crowbar that looks very similar to one that Gordon uses in Half-Life. Perhaps the developers, like many other people, are just sick of waiting for Half-Life 3. Number 9. The Ship of Theseus. So one of the robots in Midtown, Vladdy, is reading a book and he talks about a very common philosophical debate. He talks about the idea that if you were to replace every single one of his parts, eventually none of his original parts would remain. So would he be the same robot or not? This is actually a reference to a real-world thought experiment. The Ship of Theseus was the original version of this. The idea that if you replace every plank of wood, every single part of the boat, eventually it would be a completely different boat, but it would most likely have the same name. So philosophically, is it the same boat or is it a completely new one? There is no right or wrong answer to this, it's a completely philosophical question, but the mere fact that this robot is thinking about it is a good indicator of how these robots are developing. They have evolved from mindless drones to robots who have their own philosophy. So while this is a real problem for these robots, many of whom you can actually see have had parts replaced, it is also a good indicator that these robots are becoming more intelligent over time. So there you go, these are just some of the things I found in Stray. There are absolutely loads of hidden details and secrets and clues, things that you can find in this game if you're willing to go looking for them. If you did enjoy this vid, don't forget to give it a like, let me know down in the comments below what you thought of my list, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.